Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well. Thanks for joining today. We are back on the Coxton sub. Sorry, pardon my voice. I'm going to have to cough a little bit. It just is what it is. But yeah, we're back on the Coxton sub. We are looking east, actually, west right now. My bad. Just kind of off to, in the background to the right is the town of Fulton. And just to the left is the Fulton Co-op, which is one of the major industries here on the route. So we're going to kind of take a little gander through the fields here. See the beauty of the southeastern Arkansas countryside, and then we're going to head on over to the Fulton Co-op and get to work. So this was an industry that I needed to redo a bit, give some new life to it, choose some different assets and all that kind of stuff to use. So I've kind of staged some things here that I wanted to use. I had a few things before, that I wanted to get rid of, but essentially, I'm going to throw this grain elevator in, and I don't really know if I'm ever going to actually use it to load cars, but I'm definitely at least going to have it in there. It gives me the option. If you've heard me talk before, you know that I'm not necessarily in love with how cars are loaded and unloaded on this game, so I tend to just not do it. But we're going to go ahead and get some life here, so we're going to add a parking lot. Get some of these trailers staged, get some trucks in there, tractors, for those of you guys that like to call them tractors instead of trucks, big rigs. Be able to get all those in, and essentially we're going to do a lot of the groundwork to kind of get things looking nice. When I do my switching, I like to switch in, bird's eye view, but not really like really high bird's eye view. I like more kind of switching closer to the ground, and so I try to make the ground details look reasonable. That way, if you are switching from the ground, you've got a pretty good detailed view when it comes, to the scenery and stuff. And I also wanted to, sink the siding here into the ground a bit. This is technically a control point on the railroad. It does have about 3,500 feet of track, so it's got plenty of space for our max train length to be held on here. I don't use it for that very often, just because most meets happen just north of Fulton instead of here. But this is Control Point Fulton, or CP Fulton. And so, even though we're sinking the siding into the dirt a bit, it's all good. There are plenty of prototypes where the sidings are not necessarily kept anywhere near to the standard as the main. So right now I'm just going through kind of deleting some of the Turfex so I could put some less dense Turfex in there. Definitely like the short grass, but I wanted to have it a little less dense so that it would show more of the PBR textures I've got in there, and the uneven terrain, and the the muddy, dirty feel of kind of a neglected siding. So there is CTC on that siding. So if you throw one of those switches there in the co-op, you're going to mess with the CTC signals, but it's all good. Easy fix, obviously. Here I realized I was using some packaged assets. I don't want to do that with the exception of the textures, so I had to go back and throw those out real quick. No big deal. But just kind of giving it some life. I am going to add a scale here in just a second. That way we can weigh the vehicles as they come in. And then of course I realized that that means that I need to move the road a bit, so we're going to make that change as well. Right now at this first brush through, I'm not really going for the super detailing. I'm sure those of you guys that have been around the channel for a while, you've seen that, at least in the videos, I don't really go for this, super high detailed recording, just because it takes a lot of time, and there's a lot that I would do and undo, and, there's a lot of things I'd move around, and it would just kind of get into this monotonous thing of placing an item, turning an item, looking at it from a bunch of angles, and spinning around all day. And so for me, I'm not very efficient when it comes to super detailing. So at least for the videos, I just focus on going for the big picture stuff, getting the main things in, and getting it looking good. And then later on, maybe even post release, I can come back and work on making things look great, if there's a real demand for that. But since I'm more focused on operations, for me it's really mostly just been make things operable. That's the number one priority. Give them a purpose. But then the number two priority is, make them look presentable enough that it can be entertaining and not just a sea of gray. But the tracks you're looking at here, the track on the right with the transload shed, that is for unloading fertilizer and feed out of covered hoppers. and the track behind it that goes off to the warehouse, that is for loading cotton into boxcars. I do know that in the modern day, cotton is almost exclusively carried in containers, which was a new thing I learned a few months ago when I was doing some research on it. But, this is 1970/71-ish time frame. So we're still loading cotton in boxcars. We could even load it in flat cars if we wanted to. But Trainz doesn't really have any decent-looking flat cars with cotton loads that I have found that look acceptable. So I'm not going to do that. We're just going to ship in boxcars, and it's fine. They all go just, 30 miles up the road to Moscow anyway. So, but just get the parking lot here in for this warehouse. The thing about this warehouse, it's pretty much exclusively for storing cotton to be loaded into the boxcars. I don't worry about putting any extra details on the warehouse, but I didn't want, a fabricated one or one made out of concrete. This is not that expensive of a co-op. Obviously, the silo was made out of concrete, but that's because, grain silos kind of have to be made out of concrete once they reach a certain size, just to, serve as a fireproof, more or less. So one thing I didn't add was any fences. Realize now I probably actually should consider going back and doing that. But, just getting a feel for everything here. So these tanks we can more or less represent are for holding the fertilizer or the feed. Nothing too sophisticated. And then, we're going to get these trailers in for, whenever they deliver the feed or the fertilizer, they've got to be loaded in trucks to be shipped out to the farms. So I was looking here for a nice little ramp that I could use to load into some trucks. Decided that I didn't like the ones that were there, so I just gave up on that for now. Considered using a conveyor, but they're all too big, so that's something I can always do some more digging around later and see what I can find. So now we're off to the west side, going to work on the stockyard over here. It's definitely not where we butcher the cattle, but just where we load them onto the cars. And then I realized that there's a decent looking little spline I can use right here, so I went ahead and moved my my objects out of the way so I could put the spline in there. Once again, it comes back to I'm not here to simulate, a nice little cattle race. Like, I'm not here to build an award-winning cattle loading facility. It's just not what I'm into. I'm into operations. So I want to make something that looks decent, looks good, looks believable, communicates the purpose. But, the super detailing could come at another time, so. Ooh, sorry. All this talking today has been wearing my voice out. I've been sick for weeks, and I just still have this lingering cough, but we're getting there. And of course, you can't have any sort of facility for cattle without having a barn, whether or not it actually serves any reasonable purpose anymore. I like to have it anyways. But yeah, pretty much all the cattle services here on the railroad are just more or less captive service running from anywhere on the route where they're loaded down to Coxton to the butcher. So, and then here we're going to throw in some Turfex on the back, kind of level out this terrain a bit. Not that it really matters. It's not necessarily trackside, but it's close enough that it's kind of visible. So here I'm just going in and kind of softening up the elevation a bit and, trying to make it look like it's not a cliff. Once again, it would matter more if it was facing the track, but it's all kind of, way in the background. But still, it doesn't take that long to make these few changes here. So I do like these power lines. My only complaint on these power lines, as you can see right there, is as the spline curves, so do the wires, which we know obviously in real life that doesn't actually happen. So if you press the Q button on the spline points, it'll, separate them, and then they're only straight, and it won't do that anymore. But, it just also kind of becomes a bit of a hassle having to do that for the entire route. But you pick your battles. And then, throwing in some trees, getting it lined up there. We don't really need any more farmland around this part. Mostly just because it's a transition of scenes. And I didn't really want a bunch of open ground that would expose, the edge of the map and stuff. So, but just checking on the switches, checking on the triggers, or not the triggers, the track marks, make sure everything's good. Decided to lower that track as well. And just, I like things to look rugged, a bit unused. Keep in mind, this is more or less a glorified branch line. So, we're not going to get, even though the SSW was a Class 1, we're not going to get necessarily Class 1 quality way out here on the Coxton sub. So But thanks for joining in today and for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for more Trainz videos and more railroader videos as they come out. But it's always good to have you guys in, and we'll catch you guys next time.